You are listening to an episode of the Help Hope Heroes podcast, a podcast that is recorded live in a homeless shelter in South Omaha. Following stories and information are meant to inspire. All views expressed are not necessarily the views of Stevens Center as an organization. Visit stevenscenter.org for more information. Welcome to another episode of the Help Hope Heroes podcast, a podcast that is recorded live at a homeless shelter here in South Omaha. Today we have Scott McDowell with us. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. So, Scott, you work for an organization here in town called Community Alliance.
Yes.
Correct. And that's how we got to know you, right? You actually, as a part of your role there at Community Alliance, you're over here in the Stevens Center homeless shelter, doing what's called peer support, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But you also have been living in this city or in this community for quite some time.
Yes, I have.
Yep. And now you find yourself in a position where you're giving back to the community.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's a whole lot behind that, and that's what we're going to dive into today for a little bit. But just briefly today, and it doesn't even have to be like a career question that I'm asking here, but who's Scott McDowell? Tell the audience who Scott McDowell is.
Oh, that's a tough question. Scott McDowell is someone who has been through a long road of trauma and trials and tribulations, I believe, and has overcame them to the best of his ability, and has found his place in the community, and has a heart for serving his community and loving on people that were in the same type of situation.
All right, so you mentioned trauma, and oftentimes when we see people that like to give back or end up with this big heart, as you described, it can be as a result of trauma, or it just could be the way they're raised or the way they're born. Do you mind touching on that trauma for a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't know exactly where to start. So it goes back, all the way to when I was born. I was born on White Cross as a veteran. So I was already kind of intoxicated when I came into the world, so to speak, and I was raised by my mom, which struggled with mental health and substance use herself. So it started early. She had her own mental health stuff going on, so there was some abuse, mental, verbal, physical, and whatnot. And then her choice in men weren't the greatest, so there was some abuse there too.
Okay.
There's a little bit of sexual trauma. I was molested when I was 6, which was a big part of my life, I believe, in the way it went in my early childhood. I had to do a lot of work to get through that and be able to talk about it even on a live podcast.
Yeah.
And
thank you for being willing to share that. It takes an extreme amount of bravery to do so.
I've done a lot of work on it, so I believe that's why I'm able to talk about it.
Yeah.
So there's that trauma there, and then probably some trauma that I put myself through.
Yeah.
With my history with drug addiction and running the streets and whatnot. So
when did the addiction begin?
So probably about 12 years old, I tried marijuana, and then I hated school. And
because of the weed, or did you hate school before it?
I hated school because it made me feel stupid, and I always felt out of place. I was diagnosed ADHD at a young age, whatever. So I had a hard time sitting still anyway. It's not that I was a dumb kid at all. There was a social aspect of it, and then there was just the feeling stupid every day. And then there was the structure. I didn't have a lot of structure at home, so it was hard to get up on time and go to school every day when you don't have that structure at home. So there was that aspect of it too.
Well, I'd imagine even at school, maybe you're even fearful of going home because of the abuse, or that's on top of your mind about what happened the night before. Definitely. Or whatever it is. So,
definitely.
And that could have been a misdiagnosed ADHD type thing. They're just saying this kid's severely traumatized, but they don't know about the trauma. Right. Perhaps. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started selling weed when I was 12 to kind of pull my weight around the house. My stepdad at the time said, if you're not going to go to school, you got to do something to contribute. And so that's what I chose to do. My whole family, it turns out, smoked marijuana at the time, and it was kind of, some families have game night, and we circled up and smoked some pot. They actually didn't.
And they would smoke weed with you while you're 12?
No, they didn't smoke weed with me until I was about 13.
Okay. So
I was under the radar for a little bit, but finally they came around. There was you're going to do this, and you're obviously doing something with it. Wow. So you might as well join the family with it.
Interesting.
So it did take a little while for my mom to come to some acceptance of what I was doing, but eventually I was added to the circle, so to speak.
How does a 12-year-old get in a position to be able to sell marijuana?
So I guess
Was it
just
another 12-year-old giving you the hookup?
No,
I mean,
no, I guess it's just my God-given people skills. You know, I always hung around older kids or whatever. I was always told I was mature for my age, you know, that type of thing. I carried myself well, and I was just around the so-called right people at the right time that you know, trusted me like that. They said, all right, well, you can carry yourself well, and, you know, so they put a little in my hands and see what I could do with it, and I ran with it.
yeah, they fronted you the,
Mm-hmm.
see if you could make the money back. And
Yes, sir. Yep.
how'd that go over for you?
Oh, really well for a long time.
And, how'd you feel? Did you feel empowered by that?
I felt needed.
Needed.
I felt needed. People.
Was that the first time in your life?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah. It made me feel like accepted, needed. I had a little bit of a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, I was good at it. Made me feel cool. It's a mixture of things, you know, that come along with that lifestyle. I guess so you could say I got hooked on the lifestyle of selling drugs at a very, very young age.
So you were hooked to all that attention, the people needing it. Now you're getting more popular, getting invited to parties.
Yeah.
And you were the party guy, right?
Then the experimental stuff coming.
So where did that come in? I mean, you're talking, so you start selling weed or marijuana when you're 12.
Right.
Well,
and then like you say, you get invited to kegers, you know, and then acid came around.
Okay.
I was dropping acid at 13.
Yeah, that's
like
not good.
It's crazy. You know, looking back and thinking about it, it's crazy, you know, because I have a 13-year-old now.
Yeah.
You know, and to think about him tripping acid, it just blow my mind, you know what I mean? I think about that sometimes too, like, I would never buy weed from my kid at 12 years old. What are these people thinking when they were buying from me? I don't know. Yeah. You know, seriously. But yeah, so the experimental and everything started, and then there was a lot of different events moving around and stuff that happened in my life.
Like you with your family were moving around to different spots? And
yeah, we had a house for a few years on the same block, was kind of where I got established on the streets in Benton Street here in South Omaha. And then we started moving. We ended up losing our house. We went to the projects, and we kind of bounced around.
Okay.
But and then I got introduced into crank, amphetamines, and I started selling crank at 14. There was more money in it, more of a demand. It was new, exciting.
Is that when you first used it too, or?
Yeah, I was getting it given to me to start with. You know, they were just here, and I was able to contribute too. You know, I was helping my mom pay her rent and making sure she had her medication. I even put cable in the house at one time, like at 14
Did she know that
15.
that's where the money was coming from at that time? 14?
Yes, she did.
She knows crank.
Yeah, she did. I was actually on probation at the time when I started using and selling it, and I had UAs, a set schedule for UAs. I had to go in at a certain day at a certain time every 2 weeks in UA. So I would stop using a couple of days before I had a UA, go UA, and pick up where I left off or whatever. And I was running with some pretty scary folks at that time. And one of my friends, you know, brought a gun around the house or whatever. My mom got scared that I was obviously going to possibly get myself killed in that lifestyle or whatever. And she turned me into my PO. And
no kidding.
She just called him and said, he's dirty. You need to UA him now.
Wow.
And so I went in and dropped a UA because they sent it to a lab. So that bought me at least 7 days to figure out what I was going to do with, you know, with that dirty UA. And yeah, I ended up having my choice between Kearney or inpatient treatment.
Kearney is a juvenile jail.
Detention center.
Detention center.
Yep, or treatment, inpatient treatment. And I'm like, well, I'll take better food and I get to wear my own clothes. I'll take treatment.
Yeah.
And so at 15, I was sent to Nova Therapeutic Community.
Okay.
I turned 16 in there. It was actually a really great program. I mean, it was tough, you know, but there was a lot of things I learned in Nova.
Yeah.
A lot of things like along the lines of psychology and, you know, just, I don't know, it was great. They had this thing called a CSA, which was a Chief Staff Assistant.
Okay.
And I ended up, that's like the highest rank you could be in the treatment center. You just kind of help facilitate the day-to-day things. I literally took a seminar on ecstasy with the staff members and then brought it back to my youth community and represented that.
The risks of ecstasy or what it is.
The effects on the brain, all that.
So, I mean, how long ago is it? So you were 16. What year was that you were in Nova?
Oh, don't ask me to do the math.
You know.
I don't know.
Not how many years ago, but what was the date? 1980, 1985, 1990?
No, it was in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was born in 85,
okay.
so it'd be about 2005 or something like that.
Gotcha. So Just to backtrack a little bit, your mom called your PO and said, hey, drop a UA on him because he's going to be dirty, because she got scared about the crew you were running with.
Right.
Now, you were already on probation. That's why you had to do the urine analysis. What was that for?
Honestly, I don't remember.
But it was probably a weed charge, some type of marijuana charge.
It could have been a possession of marijuana or marijuana paraphernalia. Yep. And
that was all happening. And you said earlier, or actually before we went on the air, you were born in Council Bluffs. Your family eventually comes to Omaha. Mm-hmm. Were you guys always living in the South Omaha area for the most part?
Mostly.
Yeah.
Yep. So I grew up in Council Bluffs till I was about 7. And then I was actually taken away from my mom at some point. You know, it's kind of blurry. It was a long time ago. And I was put into a group home, and she worked to get me back. And then we started out in, off of Park Ave in those 3 buildings. I forget what they're called. When I was like 8, when she got me back. And then we moved off of 19th and Vinton shortly after that. And just kept, I stayed south for the majority. And then we slowly, in my mid-teens, started moving north and then more north. So.
Okay. Thank you for backtracking on that.
Yeah.
Now back to Nova.
Yeah.
You got the opportunity to go, you were the chief staff. What was
assistant.
That? Chief staff assistant. You got to go and learn, be the first to learn new information, come back, present it back to the other members of the rehab clinic or the other people staying.
Youth community.
The youth community. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was actually a great experience.
And that's when you were about 16.
Yep. I turned 16 in that treatment center.
Okay. So why do you say that was such a great experience?
Well, I walked away with a lot of knowledge from there. You know, there was this, it's called Transactional Analysis 101. It's about the parent, adult, child, and how people communicate. I learned all that there. I mean, I learned a lot of different things about my personality, who I am. Like I said, a lot of psychology stuff, effects of ecstasy and methamphetamines on the brain. I mean, they packed you full of knowledge before you left the door.
So have you been clean since your time at Nova?
No. I actually asked to go to a foster home when I was set to graduate, because I didn't want to go home, because my mom and brother lived together and I knew they were still smoking marijuana at the very least.
Yep.
And so I really didn't want to go home, because I had that urge to stay clean and at least try, you know.
What a tough decision to make as a 16-year-old, and also pretty smart.
Right.
I mean, you saw. So they obviously equipped you with the tools to see, you know, if you will, the ball rolling down the hill at you, and you're just going to walk out and get flattened by it again.
Right.
And you had the foresight as a 16-year-old.
Yeah, I asked specifically if there was any other option for me to, other than go home. And I was placed with this black foster family, the Calamises, and they were amazing people. And they were up in North Omaha off of Scott Street. Go figure, huh?
Yeah.
Right by a community pool. I remember that. And they helped me get my first job, which was a dishwasher at the Joslin Art Museum.
No way.
Which was a cool experience as well. Yeah, so it was great. And I did eventually end up going home, and I eventually ended up smoking weed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that by choice? You left the foster care system by choice, or how did that happen?
No,
Court ordered to go back home?
I can't remember quite if my time was up or if I aged out. I'm not 100% how that ended. I just remember I did transition home around the end of 17, beginning of 18.
Okay.
So
were you in school this whole time? Like while you're at Nova, were you able to stay up on high school education courses, or?
No.
So you had forced to drop out? What was that?
The last grade I completed was the 8th grade, and it was in a school called Alpha here in Omaha. Yep. It's a 3rd level lockdown school over off of Dewey. Okay. So I had been expelled and kicked out of enough schools and done enough stuff that they decided that was the school for me, you know. And that's the only reason I completed the 8th grade, to be honest, because once you go in, you can't get out until school is over. Like, you're locked in, and they have the right to restrain you and stuff like that. You know, so as long as my mom could get me on the bus to go to school, and once I was in there, you know. And I'm grateful for that, too. I mean, I don't know, I wrote my first research paper, you know, in that school or whatever, so I do have some good memories of that, you know. But, yeah, so I only completed the 8th grade, and then I ended up dropping out shortly after that. Once I completed that, I'm like, you can't make me go back. Yeah. I learned at that point, as long as I don't get on the bus, you can't make me go. I don't have to go to school, so I stopped going.
So that was the last time.
Yep.
Okay. So you get out, go to the foster family, end up back with your mom and brother, or her brother.
Yep, my mom and brother.
And what happened now? I mean, you're 17, 18 at that point.
Yeah, I lived with them for a while, and I was working, you know, and I was asked to contribute. which is fine. So I was paying a little bit of rent here and there, and typical relapse. A friend comes over with a little something, and I told him they could smoke it there, and then I end up joining in, and I was off to the races, and then so I call up my old buddy and say, hey, why don't you give me some, and it was that.
Was it meth again?
No, that was marijuana. I started back on marijuana. I did end up going back to, it was ice by that time.
Yeah.
The
crystal?
it had totally changed while I was in treatment to when I was clean and ended up relapsing. It was completely different. But yeah, so I did end up dibble-dabbling with that, but I was selling marijuana again, and there was some squabble between my mom and brother and family, and my brother ended up moving out, getting his own place, and then my mom was getting mad at me. I think I had stopped working, and I was seeing a girl that kind of moved in with me. She came over for a party one day and didn't leave, I swear to God. She just wouldn't leave. And that ends up being my child's mother.
Okay.
Yeah. But so, yeah, there was some stuff going on there. And then so my mom basically tried to move out from underneath me. I seen her slowly moving out, but I was also busy. I was working a little bit, and I was selling, and I was kind of doing my own thing. Mm-hmm. And then she would spend a lot of time with my brothers anyways, babysitting or just helping them out, whatever. And so, at first it wasn't noticeable, but then she was spending more and more time over there, and she would come home and get some of her stuff and take it over there, And then one day she finally said, you can either pay the rent or you can move out. She said, I'm moving back in with your brother at his new place.
I'm calculating here, 20? You're 21 maybe?
About 19.
19. Okay, so that happened pretty rapidly after you moved back in.
Yeah.
And now you're 20 and you're selling marijuana again, using other drugs again.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep telling the story,
so
buddy.
We end up moving in with her parents for a little while, and I was working, and I was paying, I think it was their light bill or something, and it seemed like every month the light bill got more and more, and I finally demanded to see it, you know what I mean, and there was this big fight, and so it's kind of weird. This guy, before I moved out of the house with my mom, this guy had bought the house across the street, and it turned out to be more work than he anticipated. He ended up gutting the house, and he had to run all new wiring, and he knew how to do all this, right? And he was moving his family into that house at that point. So he had two houses. He had the house he was trying to sell and move out of that needed some work, and then he had the house that he was trying to fix up and move his family into. And I had reached out to him because I had smoked some marijuana with him and probably sold to him a couple times or whatever, not on a regular basis or anything. And I had told him my problems. I think I stayed the night there with her one time during the fight or whatever, and he hit me with the opportunity. He said, well, hey, why don't you stay in this other house that I have and fix it up? You can do some of that work, and I'll knock it off of your rent. You can pay me a little, and then whatever, hours you log, we'll knock that off of your rent. And so I ended up moving into his house off like 60th and Anderson.
Okay.
And
good deal at the time for a person in your position.
Yeah, really good deal.
It's an immediate solution.
Yeah. So I had that going for me for a while. This girl that I got with had a child when we got together, and her sister had called CPS on her at some point. I don't quite remember, and said that she was screaming at him, I don't love you, I hate you, I don't want you, or whatever. Anyway, she got the kid taken away. His name's Caleb. But so that house was like perfect timing, because I was able to get him a room together, put curtains in it and a bed, and show the state that, we were capable of having him back. And we went to every visit. And I wasn't even allowed in the visits because I wasn't his biological father, but I went to every visit, and I sat outside and I seen him when he came, and I got to see him when he left. Yep. So he's seen me, at every visit, trying or whatever. And we finally did end up getting him back at that house.
Good.
But, so I was doing work on the house or whatever. I had moved a guy in as a roommate to help pay, because at this time I had gotten back into methamphetamines again. So I was actually working at first, remodeling houses, and then I would come home and work on the house that I was living in, remodeling it. Yeah, and it just became
and the
too
methamphetamines
much.
gave you the energy to do all
that's
that.
Why
right?
That's why I ended up going back to the methamphetamines, because it was too much. And then the girlfriend that I was with, not to put her down or anything, but she wasn't exactly helping me as much as she could have been, so I felt like I had to come home, cook dinner, help straighten up the house, and then go straight to work on the house. It was just too much, and I started using meth to try to keep up with all this, and then so I ended up losing the remodeling job that I was doing with the guy and just working on the house, but I also needed somebody to pay that cash part.
Yeah.
So I moved somebody in the basement.
Okay.
And anyway, typical, now the whole house is high, and I think he caught on to that factor after a while, and he just started raising the rent on me to the point where we couldn't afford it.
Yeah, he was forcing you out.
Yeah, he was forcing us out. and that's fine. I mean, you know,
Can't blame
everything
him.
happens for a reason. No, I can't blame him. Looking
No.
back, I can't blame him at all.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, so that was the end of that, and we ended up moving back in with her parents after a while, and
Okay.
that was a long road. That was a long road.
One of these moments, though, you're going to tell me you're rock bottom. I mean, there's a rock bottom coming somewhere.
Oh
here,
man,
right?
that's only the half of it, man. It's a long story.
That's
now,
fine.
so-
We got time. Podcast has time.
All right. So yeah, so we lived with her parents for quite some time, and I worked on and off, and we used on and off, and I was in jail on and off. You know, I think a significant part to this story is for the longest time I only smoked methamphetamines or whatever. I always said I wouldn't shoot up, you know, and then I had went to jail for a little while, and while I was in there, she had cheated on me with another guy and gotten pregnant or whatever, you know. And she was also shooting up when I got out, and I tried everything I could to get her to stop. You know what I mean? And she wouldn't, you know. And so I got into a fight with her one day, and I was like, if you can't beat them, join them. And I went down to my cousin's house, which was, you know, it's about 12 blocks away or whatever. And I was like, that's how he used. And I was like, do it, you know. And so I got hooked on the needle at that point, and things got really bad. And
That's what you always hear is that's when it's like a pit in your stomach or a hole in your stomach that, you know, a void that can only be filled by shooting up again, right?
Right, right. Well, you know, the disease of addiction is a tricky thing. It's comprised of obsession and compulsion, you know. And so once you put it in your body, you got to have more, you know. And once you start doing it to a certain way, you know, you're constantly chasing that same high, you know.
And your body is actually physically dependent on it too, because
Yes.
it's used to having more chemicals than not, right?
Right, especially when you go without sleep, you know, for so long. It's like the only way you can function when you get up is after you finally crash is to have more so you can have the energy to get up and do normal daily things and eventually find more and stay up and you know, start the cycle all over again. But
that's like the point of no return is when you need it to function normally.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's definitely a big sign that you're addicted, you know, dependent, chemically dependent or whatever.
So you get hooked on the needle.
I got hooked
What's
on a
next?
needle, man, and I spent a lot of time just using and kind of selling here and there and doing whatever I could to stay afloat. And then what I didn't know at the time is she had broke up with me at some point. She was just like, we're not going anywhere, you know. I don't want to be with you anymore, kind of thing. Like, you need to go figure yourself out, which is crazy. So what it turned out to be is that she started seeing my cousin behind my back, you know.
The same cousin that shot you up?
Same cousin that shot me up, yeah. You know, which is, it is what it is, you know. So I ran off and I went back to my family for a little while, and things were bad. I stayed with, my mom was staying with one of her friends in Bellevue, and I would stay with them. And, you know, my addiction got in the way. Like, the old lady was a normie, and she was like a hoarder, and you know what I mean? So I would go through her stuff and sell her stuff. And, you know, it was a dysfunctional cycle for quite some time. And then I would get kicked out, and I'd stay with a few other people. You know, it really was a dysfunctional cycle.
As you're telling me this story, all I can think is this guy's going to end up dead.
Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking is like, that's got to be the end of the story. But here you are sitting in front of me. So why are you alive today, Scott? How have you escaped?
So I don't know if I'm on my timeline correctly. So I've been raided twice. Okay. So let's see if I can remember this correctly. I couldn't stay with the old lady anymore, so my mom ended up moving in with a few of our friends. So I lived in this house with 5 girls.
Okay.
Right. And so that way I could stay with my mom. She moved in with some other people, and then I had my own room there or whatever. And I was still pretty broken up about this whole breakup with my son's mom because, you know, we had a kid together or whatever. We were together 6 years.
Okay.
You know, so that was a big thing for me. And I was just trying to stay off the dope at that time. And so I was working through a temp service. And I would literally just go to work every day. I'd buy a pack of cigarettes and a pint of whiskey. I'd go home, drink the whiskey, fall asleep, and that was my cycle for like 6 months. And then this guy knocks on our door one day to sell us some magazines. Yeah. And then he was like, you know, I didn't want to buy any magazines. And he said, well, hey, you know, I'm part of this magazine crew. We travel around state to state or whatever. You know, why don't you come with us? And so I did. I packed a bag and I went with him. And I traveled. I've been to 15 states now, but I went to 13 or 14 with them. And the magazines. It was just
You're one of those guys?
Yeah, man.
And you might have been at my door at once.
It was the party of my life, man. It really was a party of my life. And
party in what way? A good way?
Well,
Positive way?
they
Were you?
I mean, they wouldn't allow any hard drugs, but they drank a lot and they smoked a lot of weed.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I mean, and we stayed at hotels all the time, you know, that they paid for, you know, and we
Was
traveled
this a legitimate
around.
company? Or was this
You know,
a racket? Like,
you
were
know,
these
I
magazines
honestly-
falling off the back
I
of a truck?
honestly don't know if they ever got their magazines, but it was portrayed to be a competition for kids. You know, we got so many points, we get a free trip to anywhere in the United States, blah, blah, blah. Each magazine we sell get us so many points, whatever. We take the cash or the check, the magazines come in the mail. Honestly, I don't know if they ever got the magazines or not. But that's what it was. And so I had ran into some trouble in Texas. I got a little drunk and picked a fight with the wrong guy, and then the whole crew, you know, wanted to jump me or whatever, and my crew wouldn't let it happen or whatever. So they're like, hey, you know, you got to go home for a little while till we get away from these guys, you know. So they bought me a ticket back home. It was right around the time of my birthdays, December 12th, you know, and then we got Christmas and New Year's right there. So they're like, second week of January, we'll send you a bus ticket and you'll meet us in Nevada.
Yeah.
So I went home, visited my family, whatever, you know, had a good time. I was working the temp service again to keep money in my pocket while I was here.
Yeah.
Well, I met a couple girls, and it was New Year's, and we decided to go bar hopping.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm an addict, so I had a Long Island iced tea at every bar we went to.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting in a fight at the bar, and the girls ditched me, and I stole this car. This is where this is going. Okay, so I stole this car.
Man.
This was not my first time stealing a car. Okay, but I was extremely drunk, and I was walking in the wrong direction. I started popping doors, found a flat screwdriver. The car was that I popped the door, found the screwdriver was a stick. I can't drive a stick, so I went up around the corner and stole a different car.
Wow.
And then, you know, I'm young, I'm drunk, and so I go straight to, you know, my kid's mom's house and show her the car. Well, her sister was supposedly sleeping in the front room, and I think she called and told on me, but I took out 2 stop signs on the way home. That's how obliterated I was, you know. And
pretty lucky
I made,
to have not hit somebody.
Seriously lucky, you know. And I made one of the biggest mistakes you ever make if you're stealing cars, and I parked the thing in the garage, you know. Honestly, you're supposed to park it a couple blocks away, walk home, you know, pretend it never happened.
The bigger mistake might be stealing a car.
Well, yes, definitely,
Maybe,
definitely. But the mistake that got me caught was parking it in the garage.
Yeah.
And so my brother wakes me up the next day, and he's like, come on, we got to go to work. So, and we jumped in his car and went to work, and I forgot all about the car in the garage. And I get a phone call at about noon saying they found the car in the garage, and they were going to take my mom to jail and my kid to CPS if I didn't come turn myself in.
Yeah.
So, of course, I went and turned myself in or whatever. So, but now I'm here on a felony charge, and I can't go back out on.
No, can't meet him in Vegas.
Can't meet him in Vegas because you're always getting your name ran when you're soliciting. Like, they want to know if you got a permit or any warrants or whatever. A felony charge they'll extradite you for. So I'm like, they wouldn't even send me a ticket. So I had to call them and tell them I couldn't come back out on the road or whatever. And then the house of females that I was living in, you know, it's a house of females. They ended up getting into it, and the house split apart. And my brother and sister had talked my mom into moving out to Fremont, Nebraska with them. And so I had an option. I was either going to be homeless in Nebraska facing this charge. I was out on pretrial release, or I was going to have my stuff transferred to Fremont and move with them. And so I went with my family, of course. And, you know, I gave it a good shot out in Fremont. I spent about 6 months out there applying for places. And at the time, they didn't have any public transportation. So I'm walking, you know, I'm doing whatever I can to try and find a job. And honestly, I just couldn't find one. I could not find one.
Yeah.
Not that I had much of a history or much of an education to back it up to make anybody want to hire me, right? But so I just came to this point where, like, screw it, I'm going to go back to doing what I know how to do best. And there was actually, you know, a big demand for methamphetamines out there.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing. I sold dope out there for 2 years before they raided me. And I just got to this point, to be honest, Mike, where I was like, I think 24 or 25, right? I had no GED, no education, you know. I was stuck in this little town, you know, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. I felt stuck, you know, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I decided that I was going to break all the golden rules of selling drugs, and I was just going to sell to anybody with $1. I didn't care who you were, where you're from, what your reputation was. I didn't care. Okay. And that's what I did. And I went hard. I went hard as I could, and I sold to everybody, and they finally came in and they got me. So I basically sent myself to prison.
Yeah.
I was okay with it. I was okay with it. To me, that was my out. I knew that I could get my GED in prison, and I knew that if I went to prison, I would never go back to that town.
Interesting.
And so that's what I did. I got a 2 to 4 for my first number, and I did the majority of it. But while I took full advantage of prison.
Where did you do your time?
I did most of my time in OCC.
Okay.
So I did a little time in county, and then you go to D&E, and then they sent me down to OCC.
And you took full advantage of this time.
Full advantage of this time, man. I mean, I did everything that prison had to offer except for horticulture class and anger management.
Yeah.
I mean, literally. And the only reason I didn't do horticulture is because I didn't have enough time in there to do it.
You didn't want to know how to grow weed either, though. You just get
yeah,
yourself in trouble again,
but
man.
it's more than just growing weed,
I'm
man.
messing
You know
with
what I
you.
mean?
I'm
But yeah, so I did the treatment program. You know, I was going to meetings. I did a job skills class. I did a parenting class. I got my GED, and they paid me to do it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I went to church while I was in there, you know, I hit the weight pile hard, you know, and I stayed to myself, and I did my number.
Did you find some sort of a support group in there at all for your addiction?
Well, I thought I did, you know.
Or were you kind of doing it on your own? Like,
so I have this thing about changing places that I go, and it just kind of happens. God uses me in a lot of ways, and I'll backtrack on that in a second. But so in the treatment center, there's this little room, and every other week, 2 guys from Narcotics Anonymous would come in and hold this little meeting inside the treatment unit, right? And I'd be lucky if there was like 6 guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, and people from the other units can't come into other people's housing units, so they couldn't come into the treatment unit and attend this meeting, right? And I was like, well, this sucks, because I was going to meetings with guys on the yard. We would go to AA together in the visitation room. That was something anybody could go to.
Yeah.
And so I kited the warden. I was like, hey, what can I do about this, right? What can I do about this? And they directed me to this little old lady in a hover round named Miss Carr, a little black lady, mean as heck. Like, she had the worst reputation, but she really was a nice lady once she got past her roughness, you know. And she taught me how to write bylaws and set up the whole structure of a Narcotics Anonymous meeting so it was legit inside the prison. And I got with the chaplain, and we worked out a time and a place in the church because the visitation room was already used for AA and visitation.
Yeah.
You know, so we worked out a spot in the church where we could do it. And then the guys that were coming in, I got them to recruit a couple more people, so that way there was a couple guys coming every week.
Good attendance, yeah.
Right. So we had guys from the outside coming every week. And we started going, and me and my friends, and I don't know, we started out probably 10, 15 of us, you know, and still to this day, they're 30, 40 strong. That meeting is still going in general population in OCC. I'm very heavily in Narcotics Anonymous now.
Okay.
So it's actually one of my goals. I got to be 2 years off of my last paper to do the H&I back into OCC.
So you could go back and be a part of that.
So I can go back in and see that meeting and
That's
how
cool.
it's doing. When I left, we were still setting up a bank account and trying to get our own coffee pot.
Yeah.
You know, and now they got all that. They got all that going.
And you're saying 2 years off papers, for people that don't know, that means 2 years off probation? Or 2 years removed from any type of charge?
Any type of charge.
Okay.
My last one just happened to be probation. So 2 years after my release from probation, I'll be able to apply to go back into the prison and be a part of that meeting again.
So your time in prison here, as you develop this NA meeting, is that your sobriety date?
No.
Okay. What happened?
No. So, you know, and that's the thing. I thought I had a good foundation.
Yeah.
So they offered me parole. I think I only had like 4 months to jam, and they gave me parole. And I ended up going to this 3-quarter-way house out in the community because I didn't have anywhere else to parole to. You know, when I hit the ground running, I had a job within 6 days, and I was doing everything, you know, that I was supposed to be doing. But I was fresh out of prison, you know, so I started looking at trying to find girls or whatever, and I got with this girl from my past. I was with her a couple weeks, and then one day I go over there, and she says, I think you should know I've been getting high the last 2 years. I have some dope and a pipe if you want to get high, you know, and everything in me, you know, that I've learned about recovery and everything, knew exactly what I should have done. I should have walked out the door, called my sponsor, got the heck out of there, and not went back. You know, I was on parole,
Yeah.
you know, but the addict in me said, you know, drugs, sex, this is going to be a lot better. You know, she didn't have just a little bit.
Instant
you know?
gratification
Exactly.
versus delayed.
Exactly.
What did you say earlier? Compulsion and
obsession and compulsion.
Obsession and
So
compulsion.
it
There it is
started
again.
Right there it is again. And so I had relapsed, and I ended up trying to get away with it as long as possible in the group home, or in the 3-quarter-way house. But I was paying my rent, and I was doing everything I was supposed to, so they really didn't have
You just had to
much
pass
of a clue.
UAs though, right? Or,
Right? Only if they suspected that you were high.
yeah.
You know, so I never got a random UA because I was one of those guys that was going to work every day and
Going
paying
through
my
the
rent.
motions, yeah.
Right, and they barely ever seen me when I wasn't at work. I was with this girl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they had this apartment building that was a part of their program that once you transitioned out of the 3-quarter-way house, you transitioned into the apartment building. And I got all the way to there. I got to the apartment building. And then my addiction, you know, started getting full blown, and I lost my job, and I ended up getting kicked out of the apartment or whatever. And I absconded. From parole. I had a few sanctions for dirty UAs at that point, you know, and so I just took off because I knew they were going to send me back And I went hard for about 2 months, and I was finally like, what am I doing? You know, I can't get anywhere like this on the run. You know what I mean? You're constantly looking over your shoulder. You can't get a job. Can't hold.
Right back where you started, really.
Exactly.
You just weren't running when you were in Fremont, but you found yourself mentally saying the same thing.
Pretty much.
I was
in this cycle where I'm not going to get anywhere.
Yep.
You know, there's one way out. You know, and so yeah, I ended up turning myself in, and it was crazy. They did me dirty. I spent 2 days in county, and then they sent me to the hole in OCC.
Oh, wow.
I spent a week in the hole over that, right? And so I'm like, all right, fine. You know, I'll do my little time in the hole. They're going to put me back in a housing unit, give me my khakis back. I'll be fine. I'll jam my number out. No, they sent me from the hole. They came and picked me up and took me all the way back out to Lincoln to D&E, where it's 18 hours of lockdown a day.
Wow.
And I ended up jamming my number out from there. But while I was in there, the girl that I was seeing had gotten a house. She had a 401k. She cashed it in. She was kind of my sugar mama for a while anyway.
Yeah.
But she had cashed it in and got a house, so that way I had some place to go when I got out, you know. And so we did that. But, you know, when I got out, you know, we ended up relapsing and started with drinking. Same dong dance. Started with drinking. And then we started getting high, you know, and we ended up getting married at some point. You know, I was high, you know, and we just did it out of impulse, I guess, you know, and yeah, so it took me from that point about a year to destroy that marriage and separate ways 100%. And then so I found myself in this little flop house off 38th and Brown.
What's a flop house?
A flop house is a house full of drug addicts that live there and help support each other. They pay rent. They do their thing to come up with money to keep the house going, to keep the drugs in the house.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You sell out of the house. You live in the house. People come and go. It's a party house. It wasn't quite as bad as a trap house. You're probably used to hearing the words trap house.
Yeah.
So a trap house is more of a beaten down, abused, not even sure who owns it.
Yeah,
you know
could
what
it
I mean?
be an abandoned house that was taken over?
Could be an abandoned house. You know, it could just be somebody's house that they just let it go, you know, and people are in and out. And, you know, the lights get shut off, the water gets shut off, you know, and it really is. It's trapped to be there because if you're caught there, it's an obvious drug house if you get caught there, you know.
Yeah.
At least the flop house is somewhat functional.
You're going to get trapped in addiction there. Yeah,
Yeah, you're gonna
the
get-
flop
yeah.
is somewhat functional.
It's
Okay.
somewhat
All right.
functional, okay?
I
But
feel
that's-
like we're doing Urban Dictionary right now.
right. But so that's what it was, you know, and I started selling dope again, you know, hardcore.
Yeah.
Out of there, I had my own section of the basement. It was 2 rooms. I had a living room and a bedroom, and it had its own exit to the outside, you know, and I just started selling big dope out of there. I really did. And
Again, Scott.
Again. Well, here's the kicker, okay? So there was a day that I had drugs in my pocket. I had money in my pocket, and I was dating a stripper, right? And there was people in my house partying or whatever, and I was out in the driveway of this house trying to get drunk, which you really can't do on methamphetamines. They cancel each other out. And I was talking to God. And I was mad, and I was letting him have it. And I'm probably going to have to answer for some of the things I said to him that day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I told him I went out. I said, I don't understand it. I don't want to live this way, you know? In my mind, I was going to be a low-level piece of crap drug dealer for the rest of my life, or I was going to retire in the federal penitentiary, or I was going to die from my disease.
Yep.
You know? And I had this conversation with him, and I don't know, the night went on, and a couple days later, this guy came over with this busted up sawed-off shotgun with the stock falling off, asking me for tape, right? And I said, you're going to kill yourself with this thing. He's like, well, they just shot up my grandpa's house. You know, I'm going to go get him or whatever, blah, 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 you know. And so being the good guy that I am, you know, I gave him my 380. And I told him he had to get his own shells. I said, you got to get your own bullets for it. I don't want my prints on it. I wiped the gun down. I gave it to him. He left me some collateral, and he took off. Well, he obviously never brought my gun back, which ended up being a good thing because a couple more days later, and I was raided again.
Wow.
They kicked in the door. They got me with a good amount of methamphetamines and a controlled buy.
How many days after you were yelling at God did this happen?
I'd say it was within a week span.
Okay.
Within a week span. A couple days later, I gave the gun away. A couple days after that, boom, I was raided again. And that was God working in my life. You know what I mean? Because if I would have got caught with the guns and the drugs, I'd be hit. I'd still be in there.
But he needed you to get caught with something.
He needed me to get caught with something to get me out, you know? And so that's what it was, you know? And, of course, you know, they've offered me to tell on people, you know, multiple times. You know, the first raid, the second raid, didn't matter. And that's just not me. I don't believe in that. I did my crime. I'll do my time. You know, so I had them take me to jail or whatever. And when I first got in there, you know, I'm still all messed up on the drugs. You know, I got a few days sleep. And I'm like, screw this. I'm going to do this little number. I'm going to get out and I'm going to get as much as I can, because people would literally try to give me more than I wanted. I wouldn't take over a certain amount because I didn't want to go federal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so in my mind, I'm in jail and I'm hot stuff, right? And I'm like, I'm just going to take all this, that they were trying to give me, and I'm going to go hard and I'm going to retire in a federal penitentiary. I had decided that that's what I was going to do.
Wow.
But somewhere in my 6 months inside of that place, I had come to terms with, that didn't have to be the end of my life. I didn't have to go out that way.
Yeah.
It was a series of events that happened inside of jail or whatever. But I got blessed with a really good lawyer, and she was a real lawyer. I don't know why she was appointed to me, and I was telling her one day, I was like, I said, I can go back in and do another number. I was expecting 7 or 8. My first one was 2 to 4. They're probably going to double down on me. It is what it is.
You already knew how to survive in there, right?
Right. I mean, prison's easy. Your rent's paid. They do your laundry. They cook your food. You just exist. You know what I mean? Try to find something to do with your time. Stay out of trouble so you don't get more time.
Yeah.
It's cake. But I was telling her, I said, I can do another number. That's not a problem. I said, the hard part for me is going out there, getting clean, paying bills, being a dad, and living life the right way. That's what I don't know how to do. That's what scares the heck out of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she told me to write some treatment centers, and so I did. I happen to know Frank Bailey. He was director of the Siena Francis at the time. Or whatever, and it was his wife's three-quarter house I was in when I got out of prison the first time.
Okay.
And so he graciously accepted me into the program, and they let me out on bond to do treatment. And this is my second dope charge. I've already been in prison once for this, so that blew my mind that they would even let me out on bond to do treatment. But I took full advantage of it. I did. I took full advantage of it, and that was my bottom. That was my turning point. That second raid, and I had a decision to make. Nebraska's got a 3-strike law.
Yeah.
If I get caught selling anything in the state of Nebraska again, I get 10 to 60.
Yep.
Done. And that's all there is to it. And that's assuming that they just get me with a little bit. If I don't get all these extra added on charges, who knows what I'd be into that could increase that number. But yeah, so it was time to either retire or to just, either I was going to retire in federal penitentiary or I was going to give it all I got and retire out here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I did. I went to treatment. And I spent 2 months down in Siena Francis, and I got kicked out for 30 days, And at this time, I had been going to meetings again, and I had a sponsor. And yet I was faced with another decision. I was either going to go trick myself off and go back and get high because I'm out on bond to do treatment, and I just got kicked out of treatment.
Yeah.
Or I was going to try something different. And I tried something different. And I called this guy, my sponsor. I said, dude, this is my situation. Excuse me. What do you think I should do? He says, you need to get yourself to a sober living environment and call your lawyer. And so that's what I did. And that was my first encounter with the Stevens Center. This building was being built, and we were up at the school.
Okay,
the
St.
Catholic
Mary's,
school at St. Mary's. Yeah, and so I went there, and I could still pass UA because I just got a treatment. They accepted me in.
And you came into the shelter.
I came into the shelter, and I stayed my 30 days at the shelter, and I called my lawyer, and they was like, well, as long as you get into another program, we don't have to tell the judge. I was like, okay. Or get back into treatment somehow, and my now ex-wife came back into the picture along the way, and she said that she had gotten a family room down at the Open Door Mission, and she wanted me to come down there. And so I strongly considered it. I already kind of had this thing going on with my higher power.
Yeah.
And I was worried that it was going to be too much God going down there.
Because that's part of their program down there.
Yeah, it's a faith-based program, But I took a leap of faith, and I went down there anyways, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. No such thing as too much God, man.
Right. It didn't.
I can understand your hesitation, though. You're like,
right. Well, you don't want somebody shoving religion down your throat or certain beliefs.
You want it to be your choice, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I guess, I've heard a lot of war stories, like the Catholics. I ain't trying to do a bunch of Hail Marys. I don't know what I'm getting into here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I ended up going down there, man, and it was just a great experience. But I was ready. That was the difference between me and some people. I wanted it, and I was ready. I completed that program. And again, I started an NA meeting down there too. It was only AA when I got there.
And you're clean and sober today.
And I am clean and sober today. I've been clean ever since I got rated in 2013. So I'm coming up on 6 years in October.
Congratulations.
So
way to keep it going.
Yeah.
6 years, especially after hearing your story.
Coming up on it, man. And it's by the grace of God.
Since before you were 12. That's the longest amount of time you've been clean and sober.
Oh, yeah. This is definitely it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how old are you now?
I'm 33.
33. So from 12 till,
Yeah, I spent about 16 years on the street, running and selling drugs and doing drugs and stealing cars and all
And
that
you
crazy
know
stuff.
that,
That
so
comes along
that's
with
the
it.
majority of your time here
Yeah.
has been doing that, and that's where your mentality is. And
Right.
so
Right.
now you're approaching 6 years clean and sober.
Right.
You've got to be proud of that,
I am.
but you've also got to be proud of how you spend your time. So we know you now, not because you came to our shelter back in the day, but we know you now because you come here not every day. Is it every day?
It's 2 days a week.
2 days a week. Scott now works at an organization called Community Alliance. You can find out more information about them at communityalliance.org. They send Scott here 2 times a week to do what? It's called peer support. Is that
Yes,
correct? Yeah,
yes.
peer support. Talk to us about peer support.
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. When I got done with treatment, I ended up working at the Open Door Mission for 2 years at their thrift store. I was in the receiving department and all that. And I had applied. We went about a year without a supervisor, and I was already doing the job. I just wasn't getting the pay, and I had applied for that supervisor position, and they had turned me down.
Okay.
And so I kind of built a little bit of a resentment, and for me, it was just God kind of pushing me out the door, looking back on it, And my sponsor I had just started sponsoring people, right? And my sponsor was like, there's this class. It's a peer support class through Community Alliance. It's free. It's 2 weeks. I think it'd be great for you, and I think it would help you be a better sponsor. And I was like, well, okay. So I took my 2 weeks of vacation because I had been there 2 years, and I took my 2 weeks of vacation, and I went and took this 40-hour class through Community Alliance, this peer support class, right?
Now, the intent was to educate you.
It was to educate me on just kind of how to use my lived experience to work with people, to help
Okay,
people,
great.
to, you know what I mean, to love on them and kind of show them the way, if you will, and it turned it out to be a lot more than I signed up for, in a good way. So I took this 40-hour class, and by the end of it, I was pulled aside by the guy teaching the class and another individual that was in the class, and they said they were starting this pilot program where we're putting peer support specialists in the homeless shelters. First time it's ever been done in the country. They said, we want you to be a part of this. You got a history with the homeless shelters, and we think you'd be great for this position, between the way I represent.
It's a paid position.
It's a paid position through Community Alliance, based on, the way I represented myself in class, the role plays, the homework and everything. They seen something in me, that they wanted me to be a part of this new pilot program. And it was only funded for 2 years at the time, And so, I prayed about it and I gave it some thought, you know what I mean? And I took advantage of it, and I made the transition to Community Alliance.
How long have you been there now?
2 years last month.
And that pilot program went pretty well then.
Yeah, we're funded at least for another year or two.
Fantastic.
That I know of. There's some changes going on with peer support right now, but
yeah.
So we've had some good results. We've got great numbers. I'm not the person to tell you about those numbers.
Oh, that's fine.
My partner Kendra's got that stuff memorized, but
what do you do? So what do you do literally? Like you come here as a peer support specialist. I'm in the shelter and I come to you for support in any way, or what is it? Yeah.
So it's a multiple of things. How I describe it, and I don't know if this is legally describable or not, but I say I'm like a counselor without the degree.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I've taken the classes, and that's kind of what I do. I'm there to offer support out of using my lived experience.
Okay.
Right. So my addiction, my mental health challenge. I have bipolar. My experience with homelessness and everything else, the trauma, everything that I've been through. I'm able to use that experience and how I got clean and the things I do to stay well to help other people, through those same trials and tribulations in their life while they're in the shelter. Right.
I think that's got to be absolutely important to what we do. I mean, we here at Stevens Center see that a lot in the fact that, almost 40 of our 80 employees are former clients of some sort. It gives instant credibility.
Right.
When you're dealing with a client to say, I've been in your shoes or at least somewhat close to those shoes, then they're at least going to open up their ears and listen. Right.
Right. Right.
So you just fit right into that.
I do. I'm drawing a blank. Forgive me.
No, you're fine.
But yeah, so I use my lived experience and I meet with people. And one of the silver linings to being a peer support specialist too is I'm not a staff member. I don't work for the shelter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're also more apt to talk to me that way too. I don't, I don't report. I don't tell anybody what's going on. When I update a case manager, it's usually on the goals and the progress that you're making. Yep. But we're able to talk freely. And one of the things that's different about peer support versus like somebody with a licensure, like a counselor or a therapist, is I get to share my life experiences, as they pertain to the person in the situation. a therapist or a
think that's a
counselor,
no-no,
they're not allowed to talk about their personal life and the things that they've done or overcome or been through. They're not allowed to share that with the individual that they're working with.
Yep.
I am. You know what I mean? I'm able to use my lived experience to help walk them through that, to give me that credibility, but also to say, this is what worked for me. This is what didn't work for me. This is what I did.
And that's such a welcome partnership for Stevens Center, because we do have co-occurring therapists on site,
right?
Which is they're licensed to treat mental health and addiction at the same time. Right. Each client in our homeless shelter has a case manager who's setting these goals and helping them improve their lives, get into new housing, get a job, whatever it is that has driven them into poverty we're trying to fix.
Right.
And then this third prong being peer support, somebody they can just be open with, and then also hear about your experiences. I think that is just a huge addition. So we're very thrilled to have a partnership with Community Alliance and have somebody like you in our shelter on a consistent basis. So
well, thank you.
Hats off to you.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Another part of what I do also is I have a very good working knowledge of the community resources, resources that are available in our community. So if there's something that they're not taking advantage of, that they qualify for, I can help them get plugged in. Yep. And we also do offer a little bit, like a minimal amount of transportation. So there's certain barriers where I love it, because this is what I said to people for the longest time, and I still say it, is that I'm not just telling you what you should do or giving you good suggestions. If I have the ability, I'll be like, get in the car, let's go.
Yeah.
You need an ID, or you need a social security card and you have your ID. Well, let's go to the social security.
Yeah, and staff members here can't just take
you guys
you in your
can't
car.
just get up and go
can.
like that. Yeah, I can. I'm
great.
like, well, jump in the car, let's go do it. I have time, let's go do it.
Yeah.
And I work really well with Together Inc., which helps a lot of people in the community get their birth certificates and IDs or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I'm able to help take that burden a little bit off of the case manager and fill that gap and help them get that process started. And I can take them, unlike the shelter staff, to Together Inc., and I can take them to the DMV, you know what I mean, to get these things done.
Tell me about a time where you realized that your offer to help, or the compassion you're showing to somebody in one of the shelters or at our shelter, that really strikes people, doesn't it? I mean, when they finally, it could have been a very long time since they felt like somebody actually wanted to help them. It wasn't just appeasing them, right? It was actual compassion coming their way. What does that do for an individual that's in that spot?
Man, it empowers them. I believe, and it gives them that hope that they can do it too.
Yeah.
The certain individual comes to my mind, and I don't know why out of all this success story this guy's on my mind, but he was homeless for 10 years in multiple states. All right, and he was down at one of the local shelters. And he was in the program for a little bit, and they decided that the program wasn't a good fit for him, so they put him back into the shelter side, and that's when I started working with him or whatever, and I was like, well, hey, you need a job? Let's go. He had an ID, so I took him down to a temp service and got him all signed up or whatever, and met with him a few times a week or whatever. And so I would ask him every day that I was at that shelter, I was like, hey, have you been to work yet? And for the longest time, it was, no, I haven't went for this reason or that reason. And he must have got tired of me asking him, because eventually he went to work, and then the next day I came in, he was like, hey, I went to work, and it was good, and I felt good, and then like a week or so later, he was like, man, I got a job, like a steady gig washing dishes,
Wow.
and then he got picked up for housing, you know what I mean? So the ball just started rolling for him. He got housing through Heartland, and we helped him find a place, and he got a little studio off of Dodge, which wasn't too far from where he was washing dishes, man. And next thing you know, man, he's self-sufficient again.
Yeah.
He's got housing, he's got a job, he's back out in the community with all that inspiration and hope rolling right along with him, man. He was just the happiest guy. You should have seen him. It was crazy.
That's why we do what we do, though.
But nobody...
You do what you do.
Nobody was working with him at the time. I mean, they tried the program, and decided that wasn't a good fit, and then they threw him back on the emergency side to figure it out. Right, and
a little bit of compassion and that persistence of you constantly saying, "Are you doing it? Are you doing it? Are you doing it?"
Right, that walking with him through it. Let's go together and get you signed up at this temp service. You know what I mean? And then meeting with him on a regular basis. Well, how are you doing? What's going on? Have you been to work? Are you going to work? Are you going to work? That encouragement. You know what I mean? And then finally, he just said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to work." Yeah. And then boom, the ball started rolling for him, and it was just a great experience. And it was one of the happiest people I ever seen at the time, you know what I mean? It was great, but for me, it was definitely fulfilling to know that, I could help encourage and motivate an individual that had been homeless that long, you know what I mean? To finally want to do something, other than float around, it was great, and I got a lot of good success stories, but that just seems to be the one on my mind right now.
That's what community's about, though.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Right? I mean, where you're in whatever nation you're in, whatever society you're in, whether there's capitalism or whatever it is, when you have a neighborhood that can just kind of rally around people and say, we're not going to let brothers fall through the cracks, right? We're not going to let our neighbor fall through the cracks. We're going to lend a hand. We're going to give help. And then when you see the success of that, you'll see somebody like the guy you just described end up being a peer support specialist one day, and coming back. And it's this cyclical nature. And usually, it starts with people that have already received the help wanting to go back and give it back. But it's just cool stories like that make it all worthwhile. And to people that are maybe thinking about helping or giving back or doing something like peer support and you're being reluctant, you're not going to regret it. When do you regret helping others?
I think about it all the time. People are so busy today that they don't take the time to help each other anymore, man. You see somebody, broke down on the side of the street. What does everybody do? I got someplace to be. I got someplace to be. Very rarely will you find that person that pulls over and says, hey, is there anything I can do to help?
Yeah.
If we just stop and take a moment, man, be like, hey, is there any way I can help in this situation? Just love on them a little bit. You know what I mean? And
it's
encourage them. And man, take the time to help people out. You never know when you're going to be in that situation where you need that little bit of help, and it's going to make the entire difference. You know what I mean? You're just having a super bad day, a series of unfortunate events, and this one person comes along and just changes the whole day.
Absolutely. And now back to Community Alliance real quick. I want to make sure we talk about them a little bit more. I do have some information here. If you go to community, I believe it's community-alliance.org, but go ahead and just Google Community Alliance in Omaha, and you'll find that website right away. Great organization. We can't do what we do here at Stevens Center, as you well know, without the partners. You already named a few, Heartland Family Services, whoever it is. That's really what we've become, is this hub. That's what a case manager does. That's what a peer support specialist can do, is get you connected to the multiple resources that are here. While you're here, you're utilizing our services, such as shelter and food and the therapy and the outpatient services and all that other stuff. So the mission of Community Alliance is helping individuals with mental illness achieve their unique potential and to live, work, learn, and contribute in a community of mutual support, which is what you've been talking about just in a roundabout way, right? So I'm just going to give that one with helping individuals with mental illness achieve their unique potential, which means there's this foundational belief there at Community Alliance that everybody has potential. There's talent inside everybody.
Definitely.
We're all put here for a reason type of thing. And to live, work, learn, and contribute in a community of mutual support. And I think what it comes down to, Scott, and it probably took you a long time to want that because of your trauma. And again, thank you so much for sharing. I can only imagine what that was like growing up in that environment and going through everything you went through. All along, you just wanted to be able to contribute.
Right.
And you probably had a sense of pride when you were able to contribute to the house when you were 14 selling that dope.
Yeah.
And then you get back, and now you've gone through all this stuff. You've had the stuff with ex-girlfriends and getting raided and all that. And now you finally found what you want, and that's your want to contribute. And you're doing it in a great way. So hats off to you. I mean, you don't come out of a cycle like that too often. That's like I said earlier, like this story ends up with this guy dead or in prison for the rest of his life.
Exactly.
Which,
because they're handing out big numbers for that stuff now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. It's dangerous.
Right. It is dangerous. And
it gets people killed. It ruins families. It ruins, and that's why it's so important for people that, like you, that have emerged from it to stay strong, and I know it's not even an easy battle anymore. I'm sure. I mean, it's 6 years. Nothing's getting easier for you on that front.
No, it's not. Life on life's terms is what we call it in recovery.
And you're putting yourself around resources, though, and you're equipping yourself with tools that I imagine help.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have a huge support system, and what I'm doing in the community, too. I know the most people I work with, even here. If I pulled somebody aside, if I pulled you aside and said, hey, man, you know what, I got some stuff going on in my life, I need to talk. I'm sure you'd give me 5 minutes.
If you put it on the podcast. I'm just joking. No, of course I would. And that's the environment here. I think that's why people love it here and love organizations such as Community Alliance and everybody else we partner with.
Right. And Community Alliance actually did the same thing for me without me actually utilizing those services.
Yeah.
By them giving me a job, by them training me in this field, giving me a job, they've given me that purpose. And they've allowed me and trusted me to work with the community and other people and other individuals in a vulnerable state.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To help come alongside them, with faith and encouraging me that I have the potential to help walk with them through that. You know what I mean? Maybe even up and out of the mud of that.
So if you're listening to this or watching this right now and you can do that for somebody, damn it, do it.
Right.
Get out there and do it. Don't hesitate. Take that first step.
Community Alliance peer support classes are free.
That's good to know.
They're free. I didn't pay a dime for that,
To get educated on, to have this ability to go and help others.
Exactly.
Everybody should go look into that. Man, such a great story, such a great organization you work for. We've got a little bit more time here where I want to talk about something else you're involved in. And I get the blessing to go speak to you all in about 3 or 4 weeks here in September It's called the Master Trauma Foundation. What is the Master Trauma Foundation?
Okay, so there's a little backstory to this. Is while I was on probation, so for that last raid, I ended up getting 4 years of probation, and I had to take this trauma class for probation, and it was ran by a guy named Scott Carlson.
Okay.
So I took the class, no big deal, completed the class, moved on with my life. And about a month or two later, he had called me up, and he said, hey, I seen something in you. You know, I'm starting this nonprofit organization called the Master Trauma Foundation, and I'm putting together an advisory council, and I want you on it. Would you be willing to help me figure this thing out and feed information to the board from somebody who's been on probation, that has unsuccessfully completed probation and successfully completed probation at that time, you know? And he said, you know what, I just want you to be a part of this thing. And I was like, sure, you know, I was honored. And I went and I checked it out. And I've been sitting on that advisory council for 2 years now.
Okay.
It's been a great thing. Scott Carlson is a licensed mental health practitioner who created his own curriculum to work through his own childhood trauma.
Wow.
And he talks very openly about it, and I give him a lot of respect for that. And his curriculum came, it worked so well, and he got it to the accredited to where he's actually now in the majority of the probation offices in the Nebraska area. I mean, I'm not talking just Omaha. I'm talking Beatrice, Columbus, the whole state. I mean, there's a few rural areas where he's not at, but he's got somebody running his trauma classes with his curriculum in the probation offices as a part of their required classes to take.
Wow.
You know, and he's doing a great job with it. And so that's kind of where he started with this thing, aside from his practice, you know. But yeah, then he started his own 501c3, and we've been tossing around all kinds of ideas. You know, the whole goal for us, I think, really for Scott is to reduce recidivism. You know, a lot of the probation offices and parole offices, they're overloaded, you know, with people, and they just want to kind of push them through the system to get them out as fast as they can. So, you know, their goal is to reduce recidivism, but, you know, how much can they actually do?
They don't have the time to give each individual the unique amount of attention, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So our thing is, how do we help people be successful on probation and parole, and when they get off of probation and parole and their accountability and their services are cut off, right? So where we ended up starting was a non-12-step support group called Life Support. Okay, so it's Life Support is just a place where people on probation or parole or pretty much anybody can come join us, you know, and learn about different community resources and find that that sense of community and support. You know, without it being all like 12 steps, you know, recovery based.
You have to share.
Right. You know, we visit different topics. We have different speakers. We have food. We meet. They meet every Thursday from 6 to 7:30 at Beautiful Savior, just south of 96th and Harrison.
The group called Life Support.
The group called Life
Support. Which is part of the Master Trauma Foundation.
Which is part of the Master Trauma Foundation.
That's good to know.
Right now, the Scott Carlson has been delegating to the advisory council. We're kind of taking turns running it right now.
Okay.
We have different topics. He does sit in and he provides us with some really good information. We're working on brain mapping and neurofeedback.
Wow.
And the effects that has on the brain and people working through their trauma. And
so you say you're working on, but you say you're working on it, but you're researching it and looking into it. So then that can be a part of the Life Support group.
It's
education and
part.
information. Yeah,
it's already a part. We've brain mapped a lot of the people that have attended, you know, and just kind of seeing where they were at. And then there's this thing called neurofeedback, which is kind of the treatment for the trouble areas of the brain. It's a lot of information, you know, but so we're talking through that right now. The last 4 or 5 weeks, we've been talking about sleep and the effects that has on your brain and you know, and your overall mood and success and functionality, you know, and we've been visiting different studies and different, you know, ways to get better sleep and, you know, the importance of it. And, he even brought in this little machine. It's a pair of sunglasses with LED lights in it, right? And it's got these different settings on this machine, and you're supposed to wear it, and it's supposed to help you like slow your brain down and achieve some sort of a meditative state and retrain the brain to kind of idle at a slower speed for some people, like maybe with struggling with anxiety disorder or that have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. I don't know. It's just some really cool stuff.
It's another tool in the toolkit for these folks that are on probation. And
you know, and it's interesting. It keeps it interesting. You know, it's full of knowledge. You know, and that's just like our topics that we're on visiting right now, you know, but we also have these speakers from the community, like I said, coming in and bringing awareness to the people on probation and parole or whoever, you know, about the different community resources that are out there, you know, so when they are off of probation or parole or whatever, you know, if they need help, where do I go to get food? You know, where do I go to get an ID? You know, that type of thing. You
So
know,
if I want to be a part or am interested in learning more about this, is there a place I can, like, how do I do that? Do you contact Scott, or?
We are super new.
Yeah.
And what we're doing, and we are in the process of having a website designed.
Great.
Hopefully that'll be done by the end of September.
Great.
That's what we're working on. So hopefully soon.
But could I pop into a meeting?
Yes, definitely. Anybody can pop into the meeting and just kind of hang out, check
Beautiful
it out.
Savior.
Eat. Beautiful Savior.
On Tuesday?
Just south of 90.
Did you say Tuesday?
6th and Harrison. It's Thursday nights.
Thursday nights.
6 to 7:30.
6 to 7:30.
Yep.
So if you want to learn more.
Yeah. And he offers a whole bunch of different services, free counseling, child care is provided as long as we know that there's going to be children there. You know, we bring in a sitter or whatever.
And you're on this advisory board that is kind of helping steer this life support group and the Master Trauma Foundation. And you also are a regular attendee at the meetings?
Yeah, I go every other week.
Okay.
Yep, because it's also during my work hours. So I'll come in early and do my peer support thing, and then I'll leave early and go do my Master Trauma Foundation thing.
Right.
I've been sitting on the advisory council for 2 years, you know, and it's been great to be a part of something like that, you know, and for someone to value my opinion and my life experiences, you know, and delegate me some more responsibilities out in the community to help people. I mean, it's just added more purpose into my life.
And it's another tool in your tool.
Another tool, you know, and Scott Carlson's just a great resource, great guy all around, full of knowledge, you know, just an amazing guy, you know, and I can't wait to see what else we got to, you know, coming.
Yeah.
We want to do a presentation in like the middle of Nebraska for some of the rural areas and surrounding areas to kind of get on board so they can kind of start their own life support group, non-12 step in their community. And so we're working on getting that set up to where I can come out and we can talk about the Master Trauma Foundation.
Well, as that starts growing, as it obviously will, it just sounds like everything you're a part of, you know, like you said, you kind of just make change and things grow. We'd love to have you back and talk even more about that.
Definitely.
We have one last question that we ask everybody on this show. And again, I just want to express my gratitude for your time today and your willingness to share. One great thing that we've seen out of these podcasts and these sessions is people ultimately relate to our guests and in some form or fashion reach out for help. So what you're doing today is rather important. It could have saved a life. So thank you for having the courage to do so.
Definitely.
I buttered you up.
Thanks for having me
I
here.
buttered you up.
Thanks for having me here.
What does Help Hope Heroes mean to you?
For me, it's exactly what I do for a living, man. It's peer support 100%. It's using my lived experience to encourage, motivate, help, support, educate other individuals in their situations. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's exactly what I do for a living, man. It's Help Hope Hero all day long.
Love it. Thank you so much for everything you do in our shelter. Thank you to Community Alliance for any of your coworkers that may be listening out there. Thank you for what you guys do with us and our organization. Again, go out to communityalliance.org for more information about that organization, how to get involved. Be looking for information on the web soon about the Master Trauma Foundation and the Life Support Group, which is at Thursdays at 6 to 7:30 at Beautiful Saber 96 in Harrison. Thank you for listening to the Help Hope Heroes podcast. Thank you to Scott so much for being on today. It was truly a pleasure. We are here with the Help Hope Heroes podcast.
Stevens Center, for me, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
Recorded live at a homeless shelter.
I basically reinvented myself with the Stevens Center.
Our clients are the homeless, the addicted, those in poverty.
We fight the good fight.
Tear down some stigmas.
They taught me those life skills that I didn't have.
What does Help Hope Heroes mean to you?
If you come to the Stevens Center, you will be changed.